The ANC's National Congress, quite a lot of intrigue there. Professor Xulu, just please, if you could just share your thoughts about what we've just witnessed, not only in the past couple of weeks, but perhaps to just stretch back more than a century.
Well, thank you very much, my sister, and good evening. You know, the African National Congress, as the president rightly says, is the oldest liberation movement in Africa. It has gone from 1912, when it was formed by a combination of traditional chiefs plus the clergy as well as the intelligentsia. It has gone through those phases, tried in the 20s to befriend the newly formed Communist Party of South Africa. That mission failed, tried to reach out to the mission stations. Most of these people that started the ANC had been educated in mission stations. So they had that background. That's why there was always this, they thought that because they were now also part of the Commonwealth, whatever it was called, if they have problems, they have to go to England, to London, and send deputations there. But as time went on, they discovered that that was not working. That was only when they started to look at the people of South Africa to say, we're being oppressed, land has been taken away from us, everything is being taken away from us every day. And John Dube, the first president, was one of the hardest workers that this country has seen. And all of them, in fact. Then in the 1940s, as has been said, they began to say, maybe we should reach out to the masses. In the 1950s, that culminated in the Freedom Charter, but then they were banned. Now we can look at all that metamorphosis, that had evolution that they had to go through. Then it was time for exile. Exile is never easy for anybody. The first conference that they held in Morogoro in 1969 almost became disastrous because they could not agree on things, and Oliver Tambo even wanted to leave the conference because they were not agreeing, but eventually they had to stick to the liberation narrative, to the liberation struggle that they were there for. And then they were boosted by the arrival of the youth of 1976. That was a turning point altogether. And then from there, it became possible to liberate South Africa. But then they had four pillars, which was exile, the armed struggle, underground, as well as mass mobilization. Mass mobilization, we really saw lots of it in the 1980s. That was big, starting maybe 1983, 94, after the formation of the UDF. That helped the ANC in exile to be able to be in touch with the masses of the people inside the country. That was necessary so that the country would become sort of ungovernable by the apartheid system, because the apartheid system was illegitimate. That's why eventually the apartheid system had to give in, especially with the fall of some of their supporters. And then we then entered the era of negotiations and the democratic state. Now, even now, in democracy, the entirety of the script that rules South Africa today, liberation script, the governance script and everything, belongs to the ANC. If you listen to anybody else, they are just versions of what the ANC has been doing and the ANC is doing. So, as a result of this 111 years old, they are comparable to all political parties like the Conservative Party in the UK or Republicans in America, which revolved around the 1850s. You need a long time to form a political party. And you need to go through lots of trials of this and that. They have been able to pass those temptations. And now, I think, looking at,
Prof, you're speaking about the metamorphosis. I was looking at a picture there of Father Smangalisa Mkhatshwa walking alongside Utata Madiba during that historic day. And we spoke to him several weeks ago, not only about ethical leadership, but the moral compass of the ANC, where it finds itself now. So the role of the clergy, the role of the intelligentsia and this broad church to where the ANC is now, particularly in pursuing its ideals. Has it changed drastically?
Well, Oliver Tambo always said that there's a difference between waging an armed struggle and running a country. The ANC has had to adjust some of its approaches from the days of mass mobilization to the days when they are in power. When they are in power, for example, you cannot also engage on mass mobilization because you're mobilizing the populace against yourself. So that part is set aside. In terms of morality, there was a time which I think maybe they look back and regret, where someone said the ANC must have a membership of 1 million. Now, there has never been a political party of quality, of any quality, that would want to have a membership of 1 million people. Why? Because if you have 1 million people, when do they go through the policy documents and discuss them and understand them, and each one of them is able then to go and explain those policy documents to others who are not members? So I think that was a mistake, because then they began to have everybody just coming in without understanding what they call umhabolo and understanding the history of the ANC and its character. I think, but looking at what happened starting today, and in fact at the closure of the conference, semi-closure of the conference in December, I think they are turning the corner. They will become once more engaging to the clergy, to the intelligentsia, to educated Africans, to qualified people, and get those qualified people to run municipalities, to run government departments, because some of the problems that have come out in the past couple of years, maybe let me say 10, 15, was this juncture between the origins of the ANC and what the ANC looks at itself as today. But that needs now, I think when I look today, they started a conference using 4IR resources, and I said, wow, this is big and this is good. And it seems to be going out very well. You can see now they're always ahead in their thinking. So maybe we'll see more working with church institutions, civil society, working with academia. It's going to happen. You can only have hope for that, looking at what's happening now.
So, Professor, as you mentioned earlier on, the dynamics when it comes to popular control, mass discourse, especially when it comes to the struggle, the context has changed now for the ANC. And you also spoke about the fact that in Exile, its roots were in African nationalism, merged with Marxist-Leninist ideology. Has it strayed very far from those intellectual traditions? And how's that impacted on the ideal of Uhuru, this utopia that many say we were sold?
Well, thanks my sister for that question. Let me start by saying that I don't think that the ANC, look, in the beginning of Exile, it was not many people. The numbers only started going up after 1976. And they were scattered all over, and some of them did not know sometimes even where the wife was at some stage. So without coming to a relationship with the Leninist SACP and some of the organizations overseas that helped them, I don't think that the ANC would have survived exile. It would have been very difficult. And some of the resources that they got, mainly from Sweden and Russia, the old Russia, the USSR, were helpful because those Leninists that came to befriend the ANC, in 1969, they were not allowed to be members. They could be members, but not get into the NEC. But those that came, they were able to help the ANC to access resources, which the PAC, for example, was never able to access because of utopian Uhuru thinking that one day we will walk back into South Africa and the Boers will disappear because we have the numbers. They needed the resources. So also the intellectuals, the writing of policies and so on, those things are done by researchers. And in Exile especially, there were not many ANC people that were in that group of being researchers, policy researchers and so on. Later, as education, of course, the likes of Thabo Mbeki became more educated. They became clued with policy issues. But before that, it was very difficult. Then came 1990, SACP was big. Came 1994, SACP was big. Those relations with the trade union movement were very, very strong. In fact, throughout the 1980s, those relations were very, very strong. In 1996, you will remember GEAR. GEAR is what, for the first time, made COSATU and the SACP to be a little bit uneasy with the ANC, because they thought that the ANC was now moving in the direction of liberal economics, liberal politics, and were aligning themselves to the liberal economies of the time, which of course were striving in many countries of the world. Problem with liberal economics is that it does not lead to mass employment and so on, and that is what the SACP and COSATU feared. And after that, you'll remember the dynamics of the Thabo Mbeki versus Jacob Zuma. It was all about who controls the internal masses. And the SACP looking at itself as an intelligentsia, and COSATU as the ones that come with the masses. Of course, it was going to be seen who is able to have a friendship with any one of those. We remember 2007, what happened, Thabo Mbeki lost. And then after that came the popular politics. Fill Moses Mabhida Stadium, fill this and that stadium, fill and that stadium. That is good for the eye and every other thing, but serious political parties don't go to big stadiums anymore in the 21st century. You don't go there because there are many other ways of communicating, social media and so on, software. The 4IR revolution has made it very easy to communicate. That is why, and I'm laughing now, because on Sunday, they are going to a 15-seater stadium in Bloemfontein. I think they understand that trying to fill up a big stadium, a 50,000-seater stadium, does not belong in the modern era anymore.
And just finally, so let's continue along that train, maintaining the organizational traditions and maintaining movement hegemony, while at the same time allowing democratic influence. And I'm talking here in terms of agency and flourishing of empowering citizens. Do all of those align, or are they competing priorities?
No, yeah. You see, the context of this January 8th statement since 1995 is that the ANC is in power. So it does not have the luxury of being careless and pleasing everyone left, right, and center. It has got what they call central democratic centralism internally among itself. That's why they say once they've agreed on a point, you cannot then differ with what has been agreed in a committee or anything in public after that. On the other side, when, especially starting from the Thabo Mbeki era, we began to see what is called participatory democracy. Lots of going out by government to reach out to communities, Izimbizo, for example, which were found everywhere all the time. And people were able to stand up and ask questions to political leaders in government about programs, especially developmental programs and so on. That was good. It came along, in fact, until just before COVID-19. But the ANC will have to go back to that. And they will have also to strengthen the SOEs. They will have to look at the quality of education that we release. They will have to embrace the fourth industrial revolution. The biggest discussion that must go on, I think, analytically speaking, must be about economic recovery, and make sure that economic recovery consists of inclusivity. We need to see more Black people becoming active in the economy of the country. This exclusion is hurting the building of a new nation, which the ANC has been trying to do since 1912. And therefore, there are on the side of the ANC in government. And they've set this tone for everybody. Since 1994, everyone reads their script and they say, maybe I can do this, maybe I can do this better, and so on and so on. But infrastructure investment is also going to be key to ensuring that going forward, the country recovers. In terms of getting the citizens involved, participatory democracy in a developmental state is already there. It's just a matter of activating the mechanisms. We remember that whenever Parliament, for example, is about to enact a law of some sort, they hold consultations with the public. It used to be big during the Thabo Mbeki era. It must be big again, because then the public is able to, the stakeholders, universities, academic institutions, researchers, and everybody, civil society, is able to make an input in any legislation that will have an impact on society. That needs to be strengthened. They must also look at local government. I think local government has been characterized by failures based on maybe a lot of people that are not adequately qualified. But when you go out to meet with people, don't go there with 20 musicians who will sing for 90% of the time, and then only the mayor speaks after that. Allow the citizens to ask questions, to engage you without feeling intimidated.
And I think that's an apt note to leave it on. Thank you so much for your time and the insights. Historian and political analyst, Professor Musa Khulekani Xulu, speaking to us about the 111th anniversary of the founding of the ANC, the celebrations occurring in Bloemfontein.